I always thought I had it all figured out. My name's John, and I'm a 38-year-old mechanic living in a small town in Pennsylvania. My life was simple but good. I had a steady job, a cozy little house, and a golden retriever named Max who always greeted me with a wagging tail. Then there was Sarah, my girlfriend of almost 10 years. She worked as a nurse at the local hospital. We met at a 4th of July picnic. I remember that day like it was yesterday. The smell of barbecue in the air, kids running around with sparklers, and the fireworks lighting up the night sky. Sarah stood out with her bright smile and infectious laugh. We connected instantly, sharing stories and jokes until the sun went down. By the end of the night, I was smitten. Our relationship grew naturally from there. We moved in together after a couple of years, combining our lives and dreams. One of the best days we ever had was the day we adopted Max. It was a spontaneous decision. We had talked about getting a dog, but we hadn't planned on it happening that day. We were out for a walk and passed by an adoption fair. Sarah's eyes lit up when she saw the puppies, and we ended up bringing Max home. He was a tiny ball of fluff back then, and we both fell in love with him immediately. That day marked a new chapter for us, a commitment not just to each other, but to the little life we brought into our home. Max grew quickly, and our bond with him grew even stronger. Our evenings often consisted of walks in the park, Max trotting happily between us. He was a symbol of our relationship, a living reminder of our shared life and love. On weekends, we'd take him out for hikes in the nearby woods or lazy afternoons by the river. Sarah would pack a picnic, and we'd spend hours just enjoying the peace and quiet, away from the hustle and bustle of our daily lives. Sarah was everything I could have hoped for in a partner. She was kind, intelligent, and had a heart of gold. She worked long hours at the hospital, often coming home exhausted, but she always made time for me and Max. Her dedication and compassion were two of the things I loved most about her. We had our routines, our inside jokes, and our shared dreams. I thought we were rock solid. I had my share of struggles growing up. My parents were never around much. They were always busy with their own issues, leaving me to fend for myself. Trust didn't come easily to me, but with Sarah, it felt natural. She was my rock, my confidant, and my best friend. Over the years, we built a life together that I was proud of. Our small town wasn't much, but it was home. Everyone knew everyone else, and there was a sense of community that I cherished. We had our favorite spots: the local diner where we'd grab breakfast on lazy Sunday mornings, the coffee shop where we'd spend hours talking and laughing, and the park where Max loved to run around. It was a simple life, but it was ours. Sarah had this way of making every day feel special. Whether it was cooking dinner together, binge-watching our favorite shows, or just sitting on the porch, enjoying each other's company, she had a knack for turning the mundane into something magical. I never doubted her love for me, and I made sure she knew how much I loved her too. On our 3rd anniversary, I gave Sarah a necklace. It wasn't anything fancy, just a small silver pendant with our initials engraved on it. She wore it every day, and it became a symbol of our relationship. Every time I saw it around her neck, it reminded me of the promises we made to each other. It was my way of saying that no matter what, I was always there for her. As we approached our 10th anniversary, I wanted to do something special. Our lives had become busy with work and daily routines, and I felt we needed a break. I planned a trip to a cozy cabin by a lake, hoping to rekindle the spark that seemed to have dimmed over time. The anticipation built up as I imagined the serene setting, the long walks, and the intimate dinners. I wanted this trip to remind us of why we fell in love in the first place. Life had its ups and downs, but I always believed we could get through anything together. Our friends often said we were the perfect couple, and I took pride in that. I didn't need grand gestures or extravagant gifts. The small moments we shared were enough for me. Sarah had a way of making me feel like the luckiest man in the world, and I hoped I did the same for her. But life has a way of surprising you when you least expect it. Looking back, there were signs I missed, moments that seemed insignificant at the time but now stood out like glaring red flags. I was too wrapped up in my own world, too comfortable in the belief that we were invincible. Trust is a fragile thing, and once broken, it's hard to piece back together. In our little house, filled with memories of laughter and love, I never imagined that things could go so wrong. Our journey together had been one of growth and learning, and I thought we had built something unbreakable. But the foundation I thought was solid started to show cracks, and the life I cherished began to unravel. It's funny how you can live with someone for years, share your deepest thoughts and dreams, and still not see everything. Love can blind you to the truth, and I was no exception. I wanted to believe that we were happy, that our love was enough to withstand any storm. But sometimes, even the strongest walls can come crashing down. As I stood on the porch, watching Max chase after a squirrel, I felt a sense of contentment. Sarah was inside, probably making dinner or relaxing after a long day at work. I had no idea that the life I had built so carefully was about to change forever. The perfect life I thought I had was just an illusion, and the reality was about to hit me harder than I ever imagined. On our third anniversary, I gave Sarah a necklace. It was a simple silver pendant, engraved with our initials, but to me, it represented everything our relationship stood for. I still remember the look in her eyes when she opened the box. She smiled, and for a moment, it felt like we were the only two people in the world. She wore it every day, and it became a constant reminder of the promises we made to each other. The necklace was more than just a piece of jewelry. It was a symbol of our bond. Every time I saw it around her neck, it filled me with a sense of pride and reassurance. It was my way of saying that no matter what, I was always there for her. I believe that she felt the same way. Whenever we argued or faced challenges, that necklace reminded us of our commitment to work through everything together. One night, I remember sitting by the fireplace, Max curled up at our feet. Sarah was reading a book, her fingers absent-mindedly touching the pendant around her neck. It was a small gesture, but it meant the world to me. It was moments like these that made me believe we were unbreakable. We didn't need grand gestures or extravagant gifts. The small moments we shared were what mattered most. Over the years, that necklace became a part of our story. It was there when we celebrated our achievements, comforted each other during tough times, and even when we just enjoyed the simple pleasures of life. It was present at every milestone, a silent witness to our journey together. I never imagined that something so meaningful could become a source of such pain. As we approached our 10th anniversary, I started noticing subtle changes in Sarah. She seemed more distant, often lost in thought. At first, I brushed it off, thinking it was just stress from work. But as time went on, the distance between us grew. The conversations that once flowed effortlessly now felt forced, and the laughter we shared seemed to fade away. One evening, I decided to surprise her with a homemade dinner. I spent hours in the kitchen, preparing her favorite meal. When she walked in, her face lit up for a moment, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. We sat down to eat, and though we talked and laughed, there was an underlying tension that I couldn't ignore. I glanced at the necklace, hoping it would remind us of the love we shared. "John, this is really sweet of you," she said, reaching for my hand across the table. "I appreciate it. I just wanted to do something special for you," I replied, squeezing her hand. "I know things have been a bit hectic lately." She nodded, her gaze shifting to the pendant. "Yeah, work has been challenging." I wanted to ask her what was really going on, but I was afraid of the answer. Instead, I decided to focus on our upcoming anniversary trip. I hoped that getting away from our daily routines would help us reconnect. I wanted to remind her of the love we had, the bond that the necklace symbolized. The planning of the trip became my obsession. I meticulously chose a cozy cabin by a lake, a place where we could escape and find each other again. I imagined us walking along the shoreline, holding hands, and sharing intimate moments under the stars. I envisioned dinners by the fireplace, where we would talk for hours and rekindle the spark that seemed to have dimmed. As the trip approached, I noticed Sarah wearing the necklace less frequently. It bothered me, but I convinced myself that it was just a coincidence. She was probably just tired or stressed. I didn't want to acknowledge the nagging feeling in the back of my mind that something was terribly wrong. The day of our trip finally arrived. We packed our bags and loaded Max into the car. The drive to the cabin was filled with small talk and silence. I kept glancing over at Sarah, hoping to see some sign of excitement or happiness, but she seemed preoccupied. I tried to stay positive, believing that once we arrived, everything would change. The cabin was perfect, just as I had imagined. It was nestled among tall trees, with a breathtaking view of the lake. The air was crisp and fresh, a welcome change from the hustle and bustle of our daily lives. We settled in, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a glimmer of hope. That first evening, we sat on the porch, watching the sunset. I wrapped my arm around Sarah, pulling her close. She leaned into me, and for a moment, it felt like old times. Max was lying at our feet, content and peaceful. I took a deep breath, letting the tranquility of the moment wash over me. "This place is beautiful, John," Sarah said softly. "I'm glad you like it," I replied, kissing the top of her head. "I thought we could use some time away." "We really could," she agreed, her voice tinged with a hint of sadness. As night fell, we moved inside and lit a fire in the fireplace. We sat on the couch, sipping wine and reminiscing about the early days of our relationship. For a brief moment, it felt like we were reconnecting. I clung to that feeling, hoping it would last. But as the days went by, the distance between us became more apparent. Sarah seemed distracted, often retreating into herself. I tried to engage her, to bring back the closeness we once shared, but it felt like I was grasping at straws. The necklace, once a symbol of our love, now felt like a heavy weight around my neck. It was on the third night that everything came crashing down. Sarah said she was tired and went to bed early. I decided to take a walk by the lake, hoping to clear my mind. When I returned to the cabin, her phone was buzzing on the counter. I wasn't one to snoop, but something made me look. The messages I saw shattered my world. The necklace, once a cherished symbol of our love, now felt like a cruel joke. The promises we made to each other seemed meaningless. As I stood there, holding her phone, the reality of her betrayal sank in. The life I thought we had built together was nothing but an illusion, and the future I had envisioned crumbled before my eyes. The anticipation for our 10th anniversary trip had been building for months. I wanted everything to be perfect, believing that a change of scenery would bring us closer again. The cabin I rented was tucked away in the woods, offering a peaceful escape from our daily routines. It was meant to be a place where we could reconnect, away from the distractions and stresses of life. The drive to the cabin was uneventful but filled with an odd silence. I kept stealing glances at Sarah, hoping to catch a glimpse of the excitement I felt. She seemed preoccupied, staring out the window as the scenery rushed by. Max was in the back seat, his head resting on the window, completely at ease. When we arrived, the cabin was everything I had hoped for. It was cozy, with a rustic charm that made it feel like home. The lake stretched out before us, its calm waters reflecting the clear blue sky. I unloaded the car, carrying our bags inside while Sarah wandered down to the water's edge with Max. I watched her from the porch, hoping that this place would be the catalyst for a fresh start. The first evening was promising. We sat on the porch, sipping wine and watching the sunset. Sarah leaned into me, and for a brief moment, it felt like old times. We talked about our favorite memories and shared some laughs. That night, as we lay in bed, I felt a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, things would get better. The next day, we explored the area, hiking through the woods and taking in the beauty of nature. Max bounded ahead, chasing after every squirrel and bird he saw. We found a quiet spot by the lake and set up a picnic. The tranquility of the surroundings seemed to work its magic, and Sarah appeared more relaxed. We talked about our dreams for the future, and I started to believe that this trip was exactly what we needed. However, as the days went on, the initial optimism began to fade. Sarah grew more distant, often retreating into herself. I tried to engage her, suggesting activities we used to enjoy, but it felt like I was talking to a stranger. She smiled and nodded, but her mind was clearly elsewhere. The connection we once had seemed to be slipping through my fingers, no matter how hard I tried to hold on. On the third night, the atmosphere grew even more tense. We had just finished dinner, and Sarah excused herself, saying she was tired. I decided to take a walk by the lake, hoping the fresh air would clear my mind. The moonlight reflected off the water, casting an ethereal glow on the landscape. It was beautiful, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. When I returned to the cabin, I found Sarah's phone buzzing on the counter. Normally, I wouldn't invade her privacy, but an uneasy feeling gnawed at me. Against my better judgment, I picked up the phone and glanced at the screen. My heart sank as I read the messages. They were from someone I didn't recognize, and their content left no room for doubt. She was cheating on me. My world came crashing down. I felt a wave of emotions, anger, betrayal, sadness, crashing over me. How could she do this? We had built a life together, shared dreams and promises. The realization that those promises had been broken was like a dagger to my heart. I stood there, staring at her phone, the messages blurring through my tears. I felt a rage building inside me, unlike anything I had ever experienced. The necklace I had given her, the symbol of our love and commitment, now felt like a cruel joke. How long had this been going on? What had I missed? I marched up to the bedroom, my mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. Sarah was lying in bed, her eyes closed. I shook her awake, unable to contain my fury. "Sarah, wake up," I said, my voice shaking with anger. She opened her eyes, looking confused and disoriented. "John, what's wrong?" I held up her phone. "What the hell is this?" Her face turned pale as she realized what I had seen. She sat up, tears already welling in her eyes. "John, I can explain." "Explain?" I shouted, the rage bubbling over. "How do you explain this? How long has this been going on?" She started to cry, covering her face with her hands. "I'm so sorry, John. I didn't mean for this to happen. It was a mistake, a horrible mistake." Her words felt hollow, and the sight of her tears did little to quell my anger. "A mistake? How many times? How many lies have you told me?" She sobbed uncontrollably, unable to meet my gaze. "I don't know. I lost count. I was weak, and I'm so sorry. Please, forgive me." I stood there, my heart breaking into a million pieces. The woman I had loved, the woman I thought I knew, had betrayed me in the worst possible way. The memories of our time together, the moments of joy and love, now felt tainted. "I don't know if I can forgive you," I said quietly, the weight of the betrayal settling over me. She reached out to touch my hand, but I pulled away. "John, please." "I need some time to think," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I can't do this right now." I turned and walked out of the bedroom, feeling the walls closing in around me. I stepped outside into the cool night air, my mind racing. The life I thought I had built was crumbling before my eyes, and I didn't know if it could ever be repaired. As I sat by the lake, staring at the water, I realized that nothing would ever be the same again. The trust had been broken, and the wounds would take a long time to heal. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew that the journey ahead would be a difficult one. The third night of our trip was supposed to be special. I had planned a romantic dinner by the fireplace, hoping to bring back some of the magic we once shared. I cooked her favorite meal, set the table with candles, and even found a playlist of songs that held special meaning for us. I wanted everything to be perfect. Sarah seemed tired but appreciative. She smiled as she sat down, and for a brief moment, I allowed myself to believe that things might get better. We ate in relative silence, the only sounds coming from the crackling fire and the soft music in the background. I tried to engage her in conversation, but her responses were brief and distracted. After dinner, Sarah said she was exhausted and went to bed early. I cleaned up, trying to ignore the growing sense of unease that had settled in my chest. I decided to take a walk by the lake, hoping that the fresh air would help clear my mind. The night was quiet, the moon casting a silvery glow over the water. I walked along the shoreline, lost in thought. The cabin, the lake, the whole setting was perfect, but something was off. The distance between Sarah and me was palpable, and I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something she wasn't telling me. When I returned to the cabin, I found her phone buzzing on the kitchen counter. My heart pounded as I saw the name on the screen, someone I didn't recognize. I picked up the phone, my hands trembling, and unlocked it. The messages were right there, glaring at me, filled with words that shattered my world. The texts were from a man named Tom. They spoke of secret meetings, stolen kisses, and intimate moments that had nothing to do with me. My heart raced as I read through them, each message a knife twisting deeper into my chest. The betrayal was undeniable. I felt a surge of anger and disbelief. How could she do this to me? How long had this been going on? Questions swirled in my mind, but the pain was too overwhelming to think clearly. I felt like my world was crumbling around me. The life I thought we had built together revealed to be nothing but a lie. I marched up to the bedroom, my mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. Sarah was lying in bed, her eyes closed. I shook her awake, unable to contain my fury. "Sarah, wake up," I said, my voice shaking with anger. She opened her eyes, looking confused and disoriented. "John, what's wrong?" I held up her phone. "What the hell is this?" Her face turned pale as she realized what I had seen. She sat up, tears already welling in her eyes. "John, I can explain." "Explain?" I shouted, the rage bubbling over. "How do you explain this? How long has this been going on?" She started to cry, covering her face with her hands. "I'm so sorry, John. I didn't mean for this to happen. It was a mistake, a horrible mistake." Her words felt hollow, and the sight of her tears did little to quell my anger. "A mistake? How many times? How many lies have you told me?" She sobbed uncontrollably, unable to meet my gaze. "I don't know. I lost count. I was weak, and I'm so sorry. Please, forgive me." I stood there, my heart breaking into a million pieces. The woman I had loved, the woman I thought I knew, had betrayed me in the worst possible way. The memories of our time together, the moments of joy and love, now felt tainted. "I don't know if I can forgive you," I said quietly, the weight of the betrayal settling over me. She reached out to touch my hand, but I pulled away. "John, please." "I need some time to think," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I can't do this right now." I turned and walked out of the bedroom, feeling the walls closing in around me. I stepped outside into the cool night air, my mind racing. The life I thought I had built was crumbling before my eyes, and I didn't know if it could ever be repaired. As I sat by the lake, staring at the water, I tried to process everything. The hurt, the anger, the sense of betrayal. It all felt overwhelming. The necklace I had given her, once a cherished symbol of our love, now felt like a heavy weight around my neck. The promises we had made to each other seemed meaningless. The next few hours passed in a blur. I sat by the lake, my thoughts a chaotic mess. The night was silent, but inside, I was screaming. The pain of her betrayal cut deep, bringing back memories of my childhood, when trust was something I struggled with. My parents had never been there for me, always wrapped up in their own problems. I had vowed never to let myself be that vulnerable again, but with Sarah, I thought things were different. Eventually, I made my way back to the cabin. Sarah was still in the bedroom, her sobs echoing through the walls. I couldn't face her, not yet. I grabbed a blanket and lay down on the couch, staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of it all. Sleep was impossible, the weight of what I had discovered pressing down on me. Morning came, and with it, a sense of emptiness. Sarah was still in the bedroom, the door closed. I could hear her moving around, but I didn't have the energy to confront her again. I needed to think, to figure out what to do next. Max came over and rested his head on my lap, his eyes full of concern. I stroked his fur, finding a small measure of comfort in his presence. He didn't understand what was happening, but he could sense my pain. I spent the day in a daze, trying to come to terms with everything. The messages I had read kept playing in my mind, each one a painful reminder of Sarah's betrayal. The life we had built together now seemed like a distant memory, replaced by a harsh new reality. As the sun began to set, I knew I couldn't avoid Sarah forever. We needed to talk, to figure out what to do next. I took a deep breath and walked to the bedroom door, my heart heavy with the weight of what was to come. I knocked softly. "Sarah, we need to talk." There was a moment of silence, then the door opened. She stood there, her face pale and tear-streaked. "John, I'm so sorry." I nodded, the words catching in my throat. "We need to figure out where we go from here." She stepped aside, and I walked into the room, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on me. This was the beginning of a difficult journey, one I wasn't sure we could survive. But it was a journey we had to take, for better or for worse. The morning after discovering Sarah's betrayal, the weight of the situation pressed heavily on me. I knew we couldn't avoid the inevitable conversation any longer. I needed answers, and we needed to figure out what was next. I had spent the night on the couch, staring at the ceiling and trying to make sense of everything. Sarah had stayed in the bedroom, leaving both of us in a state of painful limbo. I stood outside the bedroom door, my heart heavy with dread. I knocked softly. "Sarah, we need to talk." There was a moment of silence, then the door opened. She stood there, her face pale and tear-streaked. "John, I'm so sorry." I nodded, trying to keep my emotions in check. "We need to figure out where we go from here." She stepped aside, and I walked into the room. The air was thick with tension, the weight of unspoken words hanging between us. I sat on the edge of the bed, feeling the enormity of the moment. "Why, Sarah?" I asked, my voice cracking. "Why did you do it?" She sat down across from me, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know, John. I made a terrible mistake. I was feeling lost and confused, and I didn't know how to handle it. I never wanted to hurt you." I shook my head, struggling to understand. "How long has this been going on?" She hesitated, wiping her eyes. "A few months. It started out as just talking, but then it escalated. I should have stopped it, but I didn't. I'm so sorry." Her words cut deep, each one a reminder of the betrayal. "Why didn't you talk to me? We could have worked through whatever was bothering you." "I was scared," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't know how to tell you that I was struggling. I felt like I was failing as a partner, and I didn't want to burden you with my problems." I took a deep breath, trying to process everything. "We're supposed to be a team, Sarah. We're supposed to support each other through the tough times. How can we fix this if you don't trust me enough to talk to me?" She reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "I know I messed up, John. I know I've hurt you in ways I can't even begin to understand, but I want to make it right. I want to fix this." I looked at her, seeing the pain and regret in her eyes. Part of me wanted to believe her, to give her the chance to make things right. But another part of me, the part that was deeply wounded, wasn't sure if I could ever trust her again. "I don't know if I can forgive you," I said quietly, the weight of the words settling over us. She nodded, her tears falling freely. "I understand, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make it up to you. I love you, John, and I don't want to lose you." Her words hung in the air, filled with desperation and sincerity. I wanted to believe her, to hold on to the love we once shared. But the betrayal was too fresh, the wound too deep. "I need time," I said, my voice firm. "I need time to think about everything, to figure out if I can move past this." She nodded again, her expression filled with sadness. "I understand. Take all the time you need." We sat in silence for a moment, the gravity of the situation settling over us. The road ahead was uncertain, and I wasn't sure if our relationship could survive the damage that had been done. But for now, we had to take things one step at a time. "I'm going to take Max for a walk," I said, standing up. "I need some fresh air." Sarah nodded, wiping her eyes. "Okay. I'll be here when you're ready to talk more." I walked out of the cabin, Max trotting beside me. The crisp morning air felt like a balm to my troubled mind. I needed to clear my head, to sort through the jumble of emotions that had taken over. Max seemed to sense my distress, staying close to my side as we walked along the lake. As we made our way down the familiar path, I thought about our relationship. We had been through so much together, and it was hard to imagine my life without her. But the betrayal had shattered the foundation of our trust, and I wasn't sure if it could ever be rebuilt. I thought about the early days of our relationship, the laughter, and the shared dreams. I thought about the necklace I had given her, now a painful reminder of broken promises. I wanted to believe that we could find our way back to each other, but doubt gnawed at my heart. Max and I walked for what felt like hours, the quiet of the woods offering a temporary escape from the turmoil in my mind. When we finally returned to the cabin, I felt a bit more grounded, though the path forward was still unclear. Sarah was sitting on the porch, her eyes red and puffy from crying. She looked up as we approached, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "John, I've been thinking." I held up my hand, stopping her. I don't want to talk right now. I need more time. She nodded, her shoulders slumping. Okay, I understand. I walked past her and into the cabin, Max following close behind. I needed to be alone, to sort through my feelings and figure out what I wanted. The road to healing was going to be long and difficult, and I wasn't sure where it would lead. But for now, I needed to take things one day at a time. As the days passed, the initial shock of Sarah's betrayal began to settle, replaced by a lingering ache that gnawed at me constantly. I couldn't stop replaying our confrontation in my mind, her tear-streaked face and broken apologies haunting me. I spent most of my time walking with Max or sitting by the lake, trying to find some semblance of peace. But everywhere I turned, memories of our life together resurfaced, each one now tinged with pain. I found myself thinking more and more about my childhood, the roots of my trust issues. Growing up in a small town in Pennsylvania, I had always felt like I was on my own. My parents were physically present but emotionally distant, wrapped up in their own problems. My father was an alcoholic, his moods unpredictable, and my mother was often too exhausted from dealing with him to pay much attention to me. Trust didn't come easily to me, and I learned early on to rely on myself. The memories of my childhood came flooding back, bringing with them a mix of anger and sadness. I had always vowed never to let myself be vulnerable like that again, to never let anyone hurt me the way my parents had. But with Sarah, I had let my guard down. I had believed in us, in our love. And now, that trust had been shattered. One afternoon, as I sat by the lake, I found myself thinking about my first serious relationship. I was in my early 20s, fresh out of high school and working my first job at a local garage. Her name was Emily, and she was everything I thought I wanted at the time. We dated for 2 years, and I was head over heels in love. But that relationship had ended in betrayal too. Emily had cheated on me, and the pain of that experience had left deep scars. I had been naive back then, believing that love was enough to overcome any obstacle. The betrayal had been a harsh wake-up call, teaching me that trust could be easily broken. I had sworn to protect myself, to never let anyone in so deeply again. But then Sarah came into my life, and slowly, she broke down my defenses. The 4th of July picnic where we met was still vivid in my mind. The way she laughed, the way her eyes sparkled, it all felt like a dream. She had a warmth and kindness that drew me in, making me believe that maybe, just maybe, I could trust again. Over the years, we built a life together, sharing dreams and creating memories. The day we adopted Max felt like a turning point, a symbol of our commitment to each other. But now, all those memories felt tainted. The necklace I had given her, once a cherished symbol of our love, now felt like a reminder of broken promises. The life we had built together seemed like a house of cards, ready to collapse at any moment. I found myself avoiding the places we used to go together. The park where we walked Max, the diner where we had breakfast on Sundays, even the coffee shop where we spent countless hours talking and laughing. Each place was a painful reminder of what we had lost. I started taking Max on new routes, exploring parts of the town I had never bothered with before, trying to escape the ghosts of our past. One evening, as I sat on the porch, Sarah came out and joined me. The air was cool, a gentle breeze rustling the leaves. We sat in silence for a while, the weight of unspoken words hanging between us. "John," she finally said, her voice trembling, "I've been thinking a lot about us, about everything that's happened. I know I've hurt you in ways I can't even begin to understand, but I want to make things right. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to fix this." I looked at her, seeing the pain and regret in her eyes. Part of me wanted to believe her, to give her the chance to make things right. But another part of me, the part that was deeply wounded, wasn't sure if I could ever trust her again. "I don't know if we can fix this, Sarah," I said quietly. "What you did, it broke something inside me. I thought we had something special, something unbreakable. But now..." She reached for my hand, her touch gentle. "I know I've lost your trust, and I don't expect it to come back overnight. But I love you, John. I don't want to lose you. Please, let's try to work through this." I sighed, feeling the weight of her words. I wanted to believe that we could find our way back to each other, but doubt gnawed at my heart. "I need time," I said. I need time to think, to figure out if I can move past this. She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. I understand. Take all the time you need. We sat in silence for a while longer, the tension between us slowly easing. I realized that while the road ahead was uncertain, it was a journey we had to take one step at a time. The wounds were still fresh, but maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for healing. In the days that followed, I continued to reflect on my past, trying to make sense of everything. I spent more time with Max, finding comfort in his unwavering loyalty. He didn't understand the complexities of human relationships, but his presence was a soothing balm to my troubled mind. One afternoon, I found myself back at the park we used to visit. I sat on a bench, watching the world go by, lost in thought. As I looked around, I realized that avoiding the places we used to go wasn't helping me heal. I needed to face the memories head-on, to confront the pain and find a way to move forward. I decided to reach out to an old friend, someone who had known me since childhood. Mike was a solid guy, someone I could always count on. We hadn't talked much lately, but I knew he'd be there for me. I called him up, and we arranged to meet for a drink. That evening, we sat at our favorite bar, the familiar surroundings providing a sense of comfort. I told him everything, from the discovery of Sarah's betrayal to the turmoil it had caused. Mike listened, offering words of support and understanding. "You've been through a lot, John," he said, taking a sip of his beer. "But you're stronger than you think. You'll get through this, one way or another." His words resonated with me. I realized that while the road ahead would be difficult, I had the support of friends and family to help me through. I wasn't alone, and maybe, just maybe, I could find a way to rebuild my life. As I walked home that night, I felt a glimmer of hope. The past had shaped me, but it didn't have to define my future. With time, patience, and the support of those who cared about me, I knew I could find a way to heal. The journey wouldn't be easy, but it was one I was willing to take. The days following the discovery of Sarah's betrayal were some of the hardest I'd ever faced. Each morning, I woke up with a heavy heart, the weight of her infidelity pressing down on me. I continued to spend most of my time with Max, taking long walks and trying to clear my mind. But no matter how far I walked, the pain followed me like a shadow. One afternoon, as I was aimlessly wandering through the park with Max, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Mike, my childhood friend. He wanted to check in on me and see how I was holding up. I hadn't reached out to many people since everything happened, but Mike had always been there for me. I decided it was time to open up and let my friends in. "Hey, Mike," I said when he answered the phone. "Thanks for reaching out. I could really use a friend right now." "I figured as much," he replied. "Let's grab a drink tonight."
I'm buying.
We met at a local bar we used to frequent in our younger days. The familiar surroundings brought back memories of simpler times, when life was less complicated. Mike greeted me with a firm handshake and a concerned look in his eyes. "You look like hell, John," he said bluntly, though with a hint of a smile. "But I'm glad you're here." "Thanks, man. I appreciate it." We found a quiet corner and ordered a couple of beers. As we settled in, I began to tell him everything. How I found out about Sarah's affair, the confrontation, and the subsequent emotional turmoil. Mike listened intently, nodding occasionally, but mostly letting me get everything off my chest. "That's rough, John," he said finally. "I can't even imagine how you're feeling. But you're not alone. You've got people who care about you, who want to help you through this." His words were comforting, a reminder that I didn't have to face this pain by myself. We spent the next few hours talking about everything and nothing, sharing stories from our past and laughing at old jokes. It felt good to reconnect, to remember that there was still some joy to be found even in the darkest times. Over the next few weeks, I began to open up to more friends and family members. My sister, Emily, was a constant source of support. She called me every day, checking in and making sure I was taking care of myself. Emily had always been the strong one in the family, and her unwavering support meant the world to me. "You don't have to go through this alone, John," she reminded me during one of our conversations. "We're all here for you." My coworkers at the garage also noticed that something was off. I had always been a private person, but it was hard to hide the sadness that seemed to follow me everywhere. One day, as I was working on a particularly stubborn engine, my coworker, Dave, approached me. "Hey, John, you got a minute?" he asked, wiping his greasy hands on a rag. "Sure, what's up?" He leaned against the workbench, his expression serious. "I don't know what's going on, but it's clear you're dealing with something heavy. Just wanted to let you know that if you need to talk or take some time off, we've got your back." I was touched by his concern. "Thanks, Dave. I appreciate that. It's been a tough few weeks, but I'm getting through it." Slowly but surely, the support from friends and family started to make a difference. It didn't erase the pain, but it helped me feel less isolated, less like I was drowning in my own misery. I began to find solace in their company, realizing that I didn't have to face my struggles alone. One day, while working in the garage, I noticed Emily, my coworker, quietly sketching in her notebook during lunch. She was an artistic soul, always doodling or painting in her spare time. We had always been friendly, but I had never taken the time to really get to know her. "Hey, Emily," I said, sitting down across from her. "What are you working on?" She looked up, a bit surprised by my interest. "Oh, just a little sketch. It's nothing special." I glanced at the drawing and was impressed by her talent. "That's really good. I didn't know you were such an artist." She smiled shyly. "Thanks. It's just a hobby, something to pass the time." We started talking more during our breaks, and I found her company to be a pleasant distraction from my troubles. Emily had a calm and soothing presence, and her passion for art was infectious. She showed me some of her paintings, and I was struck by how she used color and light to convey emotions. "You should consider doing this professionally," I told her one day. "Your work is amazing." She laughed softly. "Maybe someday. For now, it's just my way of coping with life stresses." As we grew closer, Emily became someone I could confide in. She didn't pry or push me to talk about my problems, but she was always there to listen when I needed to vent. Her quiet strength and empathy were a balm to my wounded heart. One evening, after a particularly difficult day, Emily invited me to her apartment for dinner. It was a simple meal, but the warmth of her hospitality made it special. We talked about our lives, our dreams, and our fears. I found myself opening up to her in ways I hadn't with anyone else. "John, I can't pretend to understand everything you're going through," she said gently, "but I want you to know that you're not alone. You have people who care about you, who want to see you happy again." Her words touched me deeply. "Thank you, Emily. Your support means more to me than you know." As the evening went on, I realized that I was beginning to see Emily in a new light. She was more than just a coworker or a friend. She was someone who genuinely cared about my well-being. The thought of moving on from Sarah was still daunting, but for the first time, I felt a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, I could find happiness again. In the following weeks, Emily and I spent more time together. We went on hikes, visited art galleries, and shared countless conversations. She helped me see the beauty in life again, reminding me that there was still joy to be found, even after the darkest storms. With the support of my friends, family, and Emily, I began to feel like I was slowly piecing my life back together. The road to healing was long and difficult, but I was no longer walking it alone. For the first time in a long while, I felt hopeful about the future, ready to embrace whatever came next.